Hey, good morning, River West Church. My name is Mike, and I'm the pastor of Family Life. And I want to welcome you to our Connect Sunday. Now, under normal circumstances, we would be meeting at the church, all right, on the back lawn. We'd have those big white tents set up. There'd be food, there'd be people. No one wearing masks. I mean, can you picture it? Do you remember the church? It's our opportunity to connect with one another and connect with the different ministry leaders and to learn more about all that River West has to offer. And if you've been following along in the happenings lately, you know there is a lot coming up. And I'm going to highlight a couple things here in just a few minutes related to our Family Life ministry. But just want you to know, we're going to be meeting in Zoom groups at 11 and 11:15, just so you can meet with some ministry leaders and learn more about what's going on at River West. Pastor Eric will have more details, but just know that is what's coming up. Okay, now, we recognize that 2020 is the year that just keeps on giving. If you think about last week, we had those crazy high winds. We had the power outages. We had the fires. And I know some of you had to evacuate your homes. And then we've had all that smoke ever since. It is daunting, to say the least. There's a lot happening, and it is completely understandable that we would be discouraged in this season. And I have certainly had my ups and downs over the last 6 months. And when I'm down, it is because I have failed to recognize God's sovereignty, His authority, His dominion, His power. And I want us to look at Isaiah chapter 14. Just, if you want to, just close your eyes. The words aren't going to be on the screen. And I want to read these few verses just because I want to be reminded. I want to remind you about God's awesome power. This is Isaiah 14, verse 24. The Lord Almighty has sworn, surely, as I have planned, so it will be. And as I have purposed, so it will stand. This is the plan determined for the whole world. This is the hand stretched out over all nations. For the Lord Almighty has purposed, and who can thwart him? His hand is stretched out, and who can turn it back? I need that reminder of God's sovereignty. Maybe you did too. And when I recognize His supremacy, His dominion, and His power, I want to worship Him. And that is what we're going to do now.
Well, thank you, Mike. And we're going to sing this song as we begin, which is a reminder to us that God is moving and He's working right now. Even if we can't see it, we believe that it's true. We're going to just remind ourselves of that. And He's with you. Let's sing this. You are here. You're moving in our midst. I worship You. I worship You. You are here. You're working in this place. I worship You. I worship You. You are here. You're moving in our midst. I worship You. I worship You. You are here. You're working in this place. I worship You. I worship You. 'Cause You are waymaker, miracle worker, promise keeper, light in the darkness. My God, that is who You are. 'Cause You are waymaker, miracle worker, promise keeper, light in the darkness. My God, that is who You are. You are here. You're touching every heart. I worship You. And I worship You. You are here. Oh, You're healing every heart. I worship You. and I worship you. You're turning lives around. You are here, you're turning lives around. I worship you, I worship you. You are here, you're mending every heart. I worship you, and I worship you, 'cause you are waymaker, miracle worker, promise keeper, light in the darkness. My God, that is who you are. 'Cause you are waymaker, miracle worker, promise keeper, light in the darkness. My God, that is who you are. Sing again. You are waymaker, miracle worker, promise keeper, light in the darkness. My God, that is who you are. You are waymaker, miracle worker, promise keeper, light in the darkness. My God, that is who you are. That is you. That is who you are. Oh, that is who you are. And that is who you are. And that is who you are. Oh, that is who you are. And that is who you are. Oh, that is who you are. And that is who you are.
Even when I don't see it, you're working. Even when I don't feel it, you're working. You never stop working. Never stop, you never stop working. Even when I don't see it, you're working. Even when I don't feel it, you're working. Never stop, you never stop working. You never stop working.
Even when I don't see it, you're working. Even when I don't feel it, you're working. You never stop working. You never stop working. Even when I don't see it, you're working. Even when I don't feel it, you're working. You never stop working. You never stop. You are waymaker, miracle worker, promise keeper, light in the darkness. My God, that is who you are. Oh, you are waymaker, miracle worker, promise keeper, light in the darkness. My God, that is who you are. That is you. That is who you are. Oh, that is who you are. And that is who you are. And that is who you are. Oh, that is who you are. And that is who you are. Oh, that is who you are. And that is who you are. Oh, that is who you are. That is who you are. And that is who you are. And that is who you are. Oh, that is who you are. And that is who you are. Oh, that is who you are. And that is who you are.
You give life, are love. You bring light to the darkness. You give hope. You restore every heart that is broken. Great are you, Lord. It's your breath in our lungs, so we pour out our praise, pour out our praise. It's your breath in our lungs, so we pour out our praise to you only. Great are you, Lord. You give life, you are love. You bring light to the darkness. You give hope. You restore every heart that is broken. Great are you, Lord. It's your breath in our lungs, so we pour out our praise, pour out our praise. It's your breath in our lungs, so we pour out our praise to you only. It's your breath in our lungs, so we pour out our praise, pour out our praise. It's your breath in our lungs, so we pour out our praise to you only. And all the earth will shout your praise. Our hearts will cry, these bones will sing. Great are you, Lord. All the earth will shout your praise. Our hearts will cry, these bones will sing. Great are you, Lord. All the earth will shout your praise. Our hearts will cry, these bones will sing. Great are you, Lord. It's your breath in our lungs, so we pour out our praise, we pour out our praise. It's your breath in our lungs, so we pour out our praise to you only. It's your breath in our lungs, so we pour out our praise, we pour out our praise. It's your breath in our lungs, so we pour out our praise to you only. Great are you, Lord. Great are you, Lord. We sing, great are you, Lord. Great are you, Lord. It's your breath in our lungs, so we pour out pour out our praise. It's your breath in our lungs, so we pour out our praise to you only. Great are you, Lord. Great are you, Lord.
We're going to end this time of worship singing some words that I believe we all need to sing, and we all need to believe are true, that Jesus is King, even in the face of sorrow, in the face of difficulty. And so I'm going to invite you to lift this up with me today. It goes like this. Glory, glory, we have no other King but Jesus, Lord of all. We raise the anthem, our loudest praises ring. We crown him Lord of all. Sing that again. Glory, glory, glory. We have no other King but Jesus, Lord of all. We raise the anthem, our loudest praises ring. We crown him Lord of all. Let's sing this. In all my sorrows, Jesus is better. In all my sorrows, Jesus is better. Make my heart believe. In every victory, in every victory, Jesus is better. Make my heart believe. More than comfort, than any comfort, Jesus is better. Make my heart believe. More than all riches, more than all riches, Jesus is better. Make my heart believe. Our souls declaring Jesus is better. Make my heart believe. Our song eternal, Jesus is better. Make my heart believe. Glory, glory, we have no other King but Jesus, Lord of all. We raise the anthem, our loudest praises ring. We crown him Lord of all. Once more. Glory, glory, we have no other King but Jesus, Lord of all. We raise the anthem, our loudest praises ring. We crown him Lord of all. We crown him Lord of all.
All right, thank you, worship team. Hey, on this Connect Sunday, I just want to highlight 3 things in our family life ministry. First of all, in case you did not know this, we have a weekly River West Kids worship service online. All right, I want you to picture all the fun, all the joy of VBS reduced down to about half an hour. There's worship, there's teaching, there's games, there's crafts, and always there's some surprises. Every Saturday, you can find it on YouTube. The links in the happening is on the website. New material every week. You can enjoy it as a family. Your children can watch it at different times throughout the week, but we'd love for you to take advantage of that. Also, hey, 4th and 5th graders, we have something special for you. It is a weekly devotional designed just for you guys, all right? And that's also on YouTube. You'll find it every Saturday. Okay, lastly, I got something for the couples out there, all of you married couples. I want to encourage you. Actually, you know what? I'm going to go stronger. I'm going to challenge you to purchase this book, okay? This couples devotional called Closer. You can get it on Amazon, all right? Kathleen and I have been working our way through this book, and it is fantastic, okay? We always have great conversations, all because of what comes out of this book. And it's designed to be done once a week for 52 weeks. All right, I'm calling this the 52-week Couples Challenge, and I hope you'll purchase the book. Let me know if you did. All right, there's a group online, and I want to be able to encourage you to keep going throughout the year and just know who is with me in this. And just so you know too, that's just a placeholder. You know, we're having to put our marriage ministry on hold in this season of COVID, but we'll bring that back. But in the meantime, I hope you'll enjoy that couples devotional. All right, now I'm going to turn it over to Pastor Eric.
Hello, friends. I want to welcome you to Connect Sunday, River West Church. As Pastor Mike just shared, this is an important day in the life of our church, where what we do is we create space within our gathering for you to really learn about what God is doing at River West. And so here's the way that the service will go for the next 30 minutes or so. In just a moment, I'm going to open up a passage of Scripture that will serve as part of our sermon series, I Will Build My Church. Then I'm going to sit down for a short interview conversation with a guy who's a part of our church, and we're going to talk just about how he and his family have engaged in what God is doing here in this season. And then finally, I'm going to give you instructions on how to join various Zoom calls at 11 a.m. From riverwest.org right after the service, where you can hear from ministry leaders about ministries like kids ministry, student ministry, our ministry to men and women, our classes, community groups and house churches, our young adult community, all sorts of ways that you can engage here at the church. We're going to dive right into that after our teaching time. In fact, normally, if you've been with us before, you know that after the message, we usually have a time of communion and singing. But this week's going to be different. Our response is going to be engagement. It's going to be engaging in these calls, which might not sound super spiritual, but we actually believe that these ministries represent opportunities for you to engage in what God's doing. So really joining us in mission is an act of worship. And so we're calling you to that. We'll bring back the elements of singing and communion next week in our gathering. And really what I want to say before we dive into the text today is that I'm really, really glad that you're here. This time in our city and our nation has been so challenging. There's so many different ways that it's challenging. And even right now, there's incredible amounts of uncertainty and even devastation that we're hearing about these fires in our state and on the West Coast. And there's just so much. But I wanted to tell you that in the midst of all that, I'm really glad that you're here. And God has something for us today. And this is even a sacred and holy moment as we open God's word together. So for right now, I want to encourage you to please turn in your Bibles to the 2nd chapter of Acts, which is a passage of Scripture in the New Testament, and it is also an amazing band from the 1970s. And if you know, look it up later. But for now, turn to Acts chapter 2. We'll be in verses 42 to 47. I'm going to read that now. They devoted themselves to the apostles' teaching and the fellowship, to the breaking of bread and the prayers. And awe came upon every soul, and many wonders and signs were being done through the apostles. And all who believed were together and had all things in common. And they were selling their possessions and belongings and distributing the proceeds to all as any had need. And day by day, attending the temple together and breaking bread in their homes, they received their food with glad and generous hearts, praising God and having favor with all the people. And the Lord added to their number day by day those who were being saved. This is God's word. So if last week's passage, if you were with us last week's passage in 1 Peter was, I think in some ways, theologically challenging. But this passage that we looked at this week it's kind of practically and relationally challenging. If last week was sort of an exploration in orthodoxy, in an accurate and right understanding of the theological meaning of the church in the world, if last week was orthodoxy, then this week is orthopraxy, how the church lives out and practices its faith as the people of God, the community of Christ for the world. Now, the passage that I just read has been treated and mistreated in really a number of ways. On the one hand, there are some who have used this passage as sort of a heavy-handed critique of basically every church community that they've ever been a part of, saying things like, if these people really love Jesus, then, fill in the blank based on this passage. And I've certainly been guilty of that, and perhaps you resonate with that as well. So that's one way that this passage has been approached. On the other hand, there's many of us who have just largely ignored the prescriptive nature of this passage, of the things that this passage is actually calling us to do. I believe Luke, who wrote Acts, and he kind of wrote Luke and Acts as like one story of how God had invaded the world through Jesus and how he'd built this community, the church. I think that Luke is actually telling us something in this passage that we read, something to the effect of, this is how I want you to practice your faith together. This is how I want you to live out life in community. I think in some ways, he's literally saying to us, do this. And so this message is not about condemnation or guilt or you're not doing enough for Jesus. I simply just want to invite us this morning to look at this passage with fresh eyes and an open heart. Because I think that this passage speaks to us very specifically in our moment and in our time as a community of Christ for the world. And so as we start the conversation today, I want to look deeply at the word devoted. Now it's right there at the beginning of the passage. In verse 42, the reader, we are told that these brand new believers had devoted themselves. And it's that word devotion that I think deserves our attention today. And so we're going to look deeply at it. It's an incredibly hard word to pronounce in the Greek, and if I did that, you would just think that I was showing off. So I'm not going to give you the Greek pronouncement of it, but here really is the heart of the word, the meaning behind it. It means this. It means to attend constantly. It means to stay in a fixed direction, despite difficulty. A literal translation of the word is steadfastly continuing. That's how they're described. They were steadfastly continuing. It reminds me of one of my favorite books, which is by the late pastor Eugene Peterson. It's called A Long Obedience in the Same Direction. That's devotion. Constant attention, a fixed direction, in spite of all sorts of difficulties. I think that we would all want to be described as a devoted person in the different facets of our life. We want to be described as a devoted friend, perhaps a devoted spouse or parent, a devoted employee. We want to be devoted to the causes that we're passionate about. We're inspired by people that are uniquely devoted. A long time ago, like back in the day, I was a youth pastor, and we had a kid in our ministry who was a star quarterback at a high school in Orange County where I lived, and He's since gone on to be an NFL quarterback. And, in our youth ministry, we had this group of kids that were super close. They'd spend a ton of time together, goofing off, making mostly good choices. But Matt was just different. Matt was uniquely devoted to something that, not just something that he liked to do, which was football, but something that he believed that God had placed him uniquely in to do. And so Matt was often saying no to certain things, or he couldn't be involved in everything because he was devoted to this craft that he had. He was devoted to developing in that. So after school, he'd be at practice or workouts, or he would be studying film, and he would be spending time with his teammates. Really, he was devoted not just to himself, but he was devoted to this community that he was a part of, working towards this goal. Now, that word devotion, it's not just an individual word. Really, it's a communal word. And Luke is particularly concerned that his reader would understand that there was a community of believers that were devoted to specific things. And so we're going to look at those today. 4 things. It's going to be very brief. And within each of these things that the early church was committed to, devoted to, we're going to find ways that we can participate in the life of the church as well. So the first thing we learn is that they were devoted, we're told, constantly focused on the apostles' teachings. The apostles' teachings would have consisted of the teachings of Jesus, and as remembered by the 12 who traveled closely with him as apprentices for up to 3 years of just living with Jesus as disciples, learning from him. So it would have consisted in what his disciples had gained from their time spent with Jesus, but it would also have consisted of these 40 days that Jesus spent with them post-resurrection, teaching them, showing them great things, great truths about who God is, and really preparing them for their mission of bringing the good news to every nation. So these young believers were fixated on what the apostles were teaching about the nature and character and purposes, even the miracles and the personhood of Jesus. They were devoted to learning about Jesus, about how he had fulfilled the teachings of the Old Testament and how the scriptures, all the scriptures had pointed toward him. And so the apostles, these early church leaders, were performing miracles and signs and wonders that would authenticate the reality that Jesus had passed his ministry on to them, his followers, his disciples. So the apostles' teaching, we're told they're devoted to the apostles' teaching. Well, the apostles' teaching would form the bedrock of what really we now see as the New Testament. So these young believers were devoted to learning about Jesus, the Logos, the Word, but they were also devoted to the scriptures that had revealed him and that pointed to him. And here at our church, we're devoted to the same thing. We want to learn the way of Jesus, how to follow him. And we want to learn that through the scriptures which have uniquely revealed him to us as a community. And so this fall, we're relaunching the gospel class. And after the service, you can learn, if you go to the classes tab on riverwest.org, you can learn about the different classes we have, but the gospel class is going to be available this fall. It's an exploration on how to learn, to live, and to love the gospel. It's not just some kind of cerebral experience, but it's a community learning the gospel together, a community of people that are devoted to the gospel. Another great opportunity for you is to devote yourself to learning the word would be to join the River, which is a community of women who are exploring the scriptures, the Psalms, to know the heart of God. So there's great opportunities there. And we know in Acts 2 that these early believers are devoted to learning, and that we should as well. The second thing that we're told is that these young believers were devoted to fellowship. Now, fellowship is one of those churchy words that kind of it can be a little cringy, but the word is koinonia. And the word koinonia means participation. It means sharing in. And we've been talking about unity in our church a lot over these past few weeks, and we will continue to do that. We're talking about what we share in Jesus and how that is greater than anything else that could divide us. But these new believers were devoted to koinonia. They were devoted to each other, and it was hard work. It was challenging. And we can't escape sort of this radical nature of their hospitality and their generosity. We're told that they were sharing possessions with each other, that they were giving freely to each other, to whoever who had need. And it wasn't out of coercion. It wasn't out of some kind of government order or a heavy-handed church leadership. They began to just give to each other as needed. We know that some of them sold their homes so that they could give monetarily to one another. We know that many of them kept their homes, but not just for themselves, but so that they could house one another if there was somebody who was in need. And what was going on with these early church believers was, I believe, something was happening to them where they began to see that their homes and their possessions were really just an opportunity to reveal to their brothers and sisters that God himself had possessed their hearts. So they didn't own anything. They were given gifts. All of life is a gift. And for these early believers, it was an opportunity to be stewards of what God had given them, to share in. And that's what koinonia means. Now, in our church, I believe that we are entering into a time, maybe even more so than ever, of unique opportunity to share in together. Radical opportunities for generosity, hospitality, for caring for one another, supporting one another. That's why we call and encourage many of you to join community groups and house churches, whether that's digital or in person. The truth is we have a shortage in these ministries of people who are willing to host house church experiences or to host community groups. I'm going to be leading a Zoom call right after the service where you can come and onto that call with some of us leaders, and we're just going to talk about the opportunity for you to express hospitality, for you to invite people into your digital space, or for those of you that are comfortable, into your home and for worship. So the early church was devoted to fellowship. Now, the third thing that they were devoted to is worship. These people were devoted to worship. Verse 46 tells us that day by day, regularly, as part of the rhythm of life, they were gathered in the temple and also in their homes with glad and generous hearts. They were gathering. They were gathering as a large group, and then they were gathering in small groups. Now, I want to talk just really specifically to the moment that we're in, and even just reflect a little bit on what we believe church actually is. What Luke describes here is significant. The early Christians, believers, they placed a high value on public gatherings of, let's just call it, going to church, going together as a community to a place of worship. And for a time before they were kicked out, they would go to the temple, perhaps in many ways the supreme place of worship, and they would gather in the temple for worship. But that gathering was not pitted against the home gathering. It wasn't necessarily called on as more important or more significant. Luke just tells us that they did both of these things. They gathered, sometimes in public worship and other times in their homes. Now, I'm going to talk even more specifically. I know that many of you are just frustrated right now that we're not having large gatherings in our building, in our sanctuary. By the way, you can come tonight, weather permitting, in the parking lot, drive-in style worship, 6:45 and 7:45. But I know that the loss of the public gathering has been something that we've grieved. I know I have. But as I've been praying and thinking and really seeking God's heart in this season, I believe, and I really believe this, that the informal gatherings, the home, especially for those of you who want nothing more than to come here, to hug each other and sing praises together, that the home, the informal gathering is of great value for God's people. And I wonder at times, I'll just say this, I wonder at times if we have valued to such a great degree the large gathering that we have lost appreciation for the small, intimate gathering of people who open God's word together and pray for one another and share needs and share their hearts. There's a community within our church that I want to talk to you about. They're called Oaks. And I should know it's older kindred spirits, older, whatever. Okay, so this is a group of women who love each other deeply. These are wonderful saints, women of great faith, who way before COVID was even a thing, they committed themselves, they devoted themselves to one another, to walk and come alongside one another, to share life. These women have shared some of the greatest losses together, whether that's the death of a spouse or all kinds of tragedies. They've shared in them together. They've always been committed to doing this. And when COVID started, we, as pastors, we began to hear reports that the Oaks were going on walks together. They were going on prayer walks together. And what they would do is they would show up at one another's houses. Maybe even some of the people in their community, some of the women who were especially vulnerable or who'd experienced great loss, they would walk together, show up, stand outside their house and sing hymns over their sisters in Christ. How beautiful is that? This radical commitment and devotion to each other, where they said, look, the world, we don't understand what's going on in the world, but we are devoted to one another. I was talking with Ginny Rodriguez, who's a part of this community. I was talking to her yesterday. I said, you got to tell me some stories. I have like way more stories that I don't have time to tell about the Oaks. But she said, I said, Ginny, so what are you going to do on these prayer walks when it starts to rain? And she literally said this to me. She says, that's why I own an umbrella. And that's it, friends. Devotion. She said, come what may. She's like, if it's icy outside, we probably won't walk and pray. But other than that, rain or shine, we will commit ourselves to each other. Devoted to worship, small gatherings, whether it's in a home or on a walk together, just devoted to that. The fourth thing is this, and we're going to spend more time talking about this over the next few weeks, but the early church was devoted to prayer. And it says in verse 42, it says they were devoted to the prayers. And I wonder what it would look like for us to become a community devoted to prayer, constantly praying, despite difficulty, steadfast prayer. So this fall, and we'll be talking about this more over the next few weeks, we're going to be launching regular prayer gatherings in our building, safe gatherings in our sanctuary, RSVP, social distance, all those things where we'll gather a group of people together regularly throughout the week to pray, to call out to God together, to cry out to him for mercy and grace, to cry out to him for his favor and provision in our world. We're going to become a praying community over this fall, and we can't wait to just invite you into that space where that can happen. So this is what we're seeking, church. We are seeking to become a devoted church, devoted to Jesus, to the word, to fellowship, to worship, to prayer. And that's what God is up to here at River West, and you are invited into that. So what I'm going to do now, the next part of our service is I'm going to invite up a friend. And we're going to have a brief conversation with my friend James, and we're going to talk about community and what that looks like for his family right now. And then we'll continue on in our service. So I invited my friend James Dirksen to come and share with us a little bit about himself and how his family's been engaging with what God's doing in this time. And so James, why don't you just take a quick minute, introduce yourself, and just tell us a little bit about your family and how long you guys have been at the church.
Yeah, my wife Dana and I moved here about 3 years ago into the area, and came by River West and loved it and been here since then. We're involved in the prayer ministry on Wednesdays, and my wife is working with the Creek to help put together some music for the kids.
I love it. How many kids do you guys have?
We have 6 kids.
Amazing. I just wanted you to know that. Okay, so as in March, obviously, as a church, we were not able to gather anymore in our building, and we were. I know you guys formed a house church in that period of time, and you mentioned to me that the kind of driving theme behind that was this theme of communion, of actually like taking communion. Really inspired you guys to consider gathering. Can you just talk to us a little bit about that?
Yeah, things kind of changed, right about the beginning of summer, and the church said it's time to start taking communion. You guys started offering elements and things like that, and I just thought, for taking communion, it probably shouldn't just be our family. We need to be gathering together with other believers in the body. Yeah. The Bible talks about gathering together, praying together, learning the scriptures, and taking communion. That's the model, that's the design for church. And we said, let's bring as much of those elements back home as we could.
I love it. So talk to us just about what are some of the things that your house church does when you gather. Yeah. So you gather people in your house and you really prioritize safety and all these kinds of elements that are important in this season. But what are some of the things that you guys are doing in your...
Well, like I said, we try to bring as many of the elements from the services we have here home as we can while we're prioritizing safety. So everybody shows up, we meet outside, everybody's spaced apart and brings chairs and sets up or blankets on the ground like a picnic style. We put up a big screen on the patio and everybody from the grass watches the screen from there. And so when the singing starts, we all start singing. Then when the sermon starts, we pause it. Somebody takes all the little kids off to give them some, singing and craft time over in another part of the yard, and then the adults sit there and listen to the sermon. When the sermon stops, we pause it again. Everybody comes back and do some more singing. And then when it's time for communion, we suit up in hazmat suits and masks and wash our hands and hand out hand sanitizer, and then we go out with, individual communion service and give everybody communion, and then use the liturgy you guys have provided to tell everybody what to eat and what it means and that kind of stuff.
Wow.
And then we close in prayer.
I love it. So just how would you encourage, I know how would you encourage somebody right now, and I just love to hear about the things that you guys are prioritizing. How would you encourage someone right now, maybe in our church community, who is thinking, I'm not connected on Sundays. Maybe they're watching the messages or they're watching the service, but there's no connection to other people. How would you encourage them? People of all sorts of comfort levels.
Yeah, I think the church is doing a great job in that. You guys have, Stacy Nelson is ready to connect people to other people. So if you're not connected at all, get in touch with her. The pastors are doing a great job helping people figure out that for them, what's the right way to meet. And everybody has different safety concerns and they want to prioritize different things. And, we have 40 people meeting in a backyard. That's an extreme. You could be, 2 or 3 people meeting on Zoom. That's still gathering together and doing it together. But the whole idea of prioritizing the meeting together, I think, is important. This isn't going to end really soon. And we need to bring back that fellowship.
I love it. Thank you so much for sharing that with us and for being a part of our church community and prioritizing gathering together. We really appreciate it. Thanks. Okay, friends, here's how this is going to work, we hope. Starting at 11 a.m., so in just a few moments, you can join Zoom calls from riverwest.org/digital connect. It'll be on the homepage of riverwest.org. On that page, you can join various calls that represent different ministries in our church. So each ministry category will host 2 calls, one at 11 and then one at 11:15. So these will be short, like 10 to 12 minutes long each, and each call will have leaders on it who will share passionately with you about what is going on here at the church. So here are the categories, and I'll talk a little bit about each one of them. Women. You can hear, on the women Zoom call, you can hear about the river our women's Bible study. You can hear about a new ministry we're launching for young moms called Woven Together. You can hear about the Oaks ministry that I talked about and other opportunities. That call is going to be led by Pastor Marianne and the women's ministry team. Men, there's a tab for men. This will be a call that will be led by Pastor Mike. He's going to be talking about opportunities for men and for dads and also for marriage. So there's going to be great stuff there. I encourage you to check that out. Student ministry, this call will be led by Pastor Jeff Spiegel. He's going to be talking about what is happening for junior high, high school, and our college ministry. Community groups and house churches. So I'm going to be leading this call with Pastor Adam and some folks from the community life team, and we're going to be talking about community groups that you can join. We're going to be talking about different ways that you can host a house church, whether that's digital or in person. We've talked through some of the ways to think through that. And we really, again, we want to welcome you to consider being a part of that call, because really there's some great opportunities for engagement in our church. We will have a call for the young adults community. So this is a community for 20-somethings. It'll be led by Derek Dahlmeyer, who's on our team. He's going to be leading that. This is an amazing community for those kind of 20-something post-college young professional folks who are really seeking to get connected. We'll have another tab called classes. Now, classes are great ways to learn and grow. We've already talked about the gospel class earlier, but we'll also talk about a class coming up next week called Introducing River West. If you're new to our church community, or if you've never been to Introducing River West, we would so encourage you to be a part of it. It'll be a digital class. It'll be on Zoom, but Introducing River West is a great way to meet leaders from our church, elders from our church, and to hear the history of our church and where we see God taking us, what we value, what we're committed to. Would love to have you a part of that. That's September 20th, next week. And then we also have a tab for River West Kids. This will be led by Kathleen and Nicole, who are part of our River West team, our staff team, and they're going to be sharing about the many great things that are happening in kids and families right now, including a service that's available for families on the weekends. And so those are the categories. Now, again, I mentioned, so they each category will do like basically an identical presentation, one at 11 and one at 11:15. So you have the opportunity to go to two of these. If you're really interested in what's going on for women, go to that call at 11. But then there will be a second call on that tab that you can click on that starts at 11:15 if you want to hear about community groups or house churches. So you can match a little bit. If there's multiple people in your household, you can have a few people join one call and others join another one. We're doing the best we can to let you know what God is doing here at our church. And so we so encourage you to engage in something this fall that God's doing here. And we're excited about where we're headed. We're excited about growing together and as a community that's devoted to Jesus. And so that's your call today. In just a few minutes, you can hop on those, 11 a.m. and 11:15. God bless. We love you, and we'll see you soon.